Frances Anne, what made you want to tell that story? Because there's a beautiful line in the film. I mean, there were loads of beautiful lines. And I have to say, before I say much more, I want to commend Frances Anne on this, on the language, on the tone, on the music, on the beautiful scenery. I just want to say thank you. That was absolutely amazing. But there was one part where C.L.R. James says, they will stop at nothing to stop us owning our narrative. Now, what Frances Anne has done is made sure that we're all aware, our children and others who didn't know Ulric's life as well as even I did, now know his full story. I just want to know from you, what compelled you to want to make this film?
Well, I told you about the deathbed promise and the fulfillment of that. I think the moment when I got engaged was when the whole Africa story kind of unfolded in front of me. But in terms of that particular line, I will say that I worked at the BBC for 15 years. And in my first job, which was at Ebony, the BBC's first black magazine program.
Which I presented.
That's where I know you from. I was trying to remember why you were so familiar to me. We were covering the Broadwater Farm riots, right? Oh, no, the Broadwater Farm...
Uprising.
No, sorry, uprising, yeah. But trials. The trials after when all those boys were arrested and put on trial. And six men were unjustly charged and sent to jail for 25 years. But I remember going to the farm afterwards, after the verdicts went down and the convictions had been handed down. We covered the trials for weeks. And the community was angry. They were upset. And we interviewed people and so on. We went back to the BBC and we put together a show that was to go out that night as current affairs. And the head of BBC Network Television came down to the editing studio in the basement and stopped the broadcast because he said it was not balanced. He said it wasn't balanced, that black people having a voice was not true. And I can't tell you how that marked me. So when I learned that Ulric had been working at the BBC and also that he walked out of that job, I thought I knew why. And I felt that the whole telling of this story is about telling our stories and our words from our point of view, all of it, uncensored. And so that's why I wanted to tell the story.
I'm going to turn very quickly to my lovely friend here, Rudolph. I know that... behave. I'm asking permission from his wife.
Permission not granted.
Now,
yes.
Rudolph, many of you know you obviously from the screen. They know you from EastEnders, but they don't always understand the background. Again, another champion with his Rudolph Walker Drama Awards and his foundation, and also the work that he's done behind the scenes with our late, great Bernie Grant MP, to make sure that we have the fulfillment of the Bernie Grant Arts Centre and numerous other charities along the way. He's done lots of work with the Mary Seacole Memorial Statue. I see Sister Monica out there. And also with the Amos Bursary and lots of other charitable work. Now, this man, Ulric, this is somebody that you clearly felt very passionate about.
Oh, very much so. I was fortunate to spend a lot of time with him when he was High Commissioner over here. And with due respect to all the other High Commissioners that Trinidad has had over here, I found him accessible. I found him very warm. He was a man of the people. I can't praise him high enough. I mean, there's one little, a little incident that an invitation I got from Ulric, that was many years ago, and that was to accompany him to Lancaster House for a meeting of various dignitaries. And I thought, me, Rudolph Walker, you inviting me? He said, yes, I would like you to come along. And when I arrived, there was my name at Lancaster House at the table. But that's the man. But before I mean, there isn't really a great deal. So when my dear friend approached me and said, look, we want to do this documentary film on Ulric, how many years ago? I just said, whatever you want me to do, I'll try and get the time off from EastEnders, and I'll be one of the first guys that you'll have on your cast list, or whatever. And it wasn't in fact, at that point in time, it wasn't really a case of playing any particular character. It was just being involved in such a fantastic story. I knew a little bit about Ulric at the time. But also what was satisfying for me, and don't know whether you're prepared to say any more about that. When this beautiful lady here was a student, and her very first, at the end of your training as a director, you're asked to do a small film to present to the powers that be, the directors and producers and your teachers. And somehow that she got in touch with me and said, Rudolph, or Mr. Walker, I think she referred to me. I'd love you to be in this little film. I'm a student. And Carmen Monroe and myself said, yes. So here I am, many years later, working for this fantastic director.
Excellent. Is he good to direct? Does he follow orders well? Let's move on. Moving swiftly on. Fraser,
I think, actually, to be honest, you see that there were a lot of really big British actors, important British actors who got involved, and I really honestly believe that because Rudolph was involved, it created an atmosphere of safety, because they didn't know me as a director. I'd been away for a very long time, and it wasn't a Hollywood movie. It was very low budget.
Low budget.
Very low budget. But I won't go into details about how I actually got all those people to jump on board. But I will say that it gave it a legitimacy and a status and a safety that Rudolph gave it his blessing, and was our patron. Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Fraser James.
Hi.
What an absolute brilliant privilege it was.
Absolutely.
You know what? From start to finish. Yeah? Real power.
Absolutely.
Real power.
Yeah.
You aged. It was
Thick. Yeah.
it was just
The
absolutely-
ever-adjusting wig.
It's fine. It's okay.
Yes. How did you find it? The whole story, the way it was done with the documentary and the live filming and everything.
It's to see it again, because I was, thank you, Francis Ann, for inviting me to Trinidad for the premiere, which was amazing. And the movie's slightly changed since then. But to sit here and watch it again, I think what Francis Ann did amazingly was combine that archival footage with what we shot, really well. That really does, it really does, as, I think a big thing of going to the cinema is that you're immersed into a different world, and you exist in that world for the entirety of the movie, and then you come back into normal life again. But, watching it, I'd say it's kind of bittersweet watching it, because I love being immersed in it, but I'm absolutely gutted at the contrived missed opportunity that we all had for the United States of Africa, just watching it.
Absolutely.
And you realize how close that might have been, and how contrived it absolutely was to make certain it didn't happen. But at the same time, by the end of the movie, and I think that's fantastic what you did right at the end of the movie, I'm left uplifted, and I'm left strong. And I'll say this to a man that's in the audience right now, Franklin Rogers, who's an amazing photographer. He's a genius artist that we have amongst us. And I'm working with Frank at the moment on another project. And I just say, watching this, Frank, you know, it just gives me such spirit and hope that we can deliver again and stand on the shoulders of these ancestors that we have, you know, and try our best to do something which is worthy of them, you know, and who went before us. So, I mean, I think that playing George was you know, for me, a real moment, you know, as an actor, because I didn't know anything about him before, prior to meeting Francis Anne. Francis Anne broke down to me who he was on our first meeting. I went away, I did some research, and when I found out who this guy was, it just blew me away, you know, and not only who he was, but the people he had around him, and where they came from. Came from the Caribbean, from Trinidad, and I was like,
Trinidad,
huh?
yes.
How? You know? So, yeah.
All right, from the West Indies, from the Caribbean. All right.
I think there were a few from Guyana as well, right? And Jamaica.
And Jamaica, yes.
St. Lucia, Barbados, Vincentians. Here we go.
And Grenada.
And Pippa, where are you from? What do you want to shout out? What shout out? Bedfordshire. Let's hear it for Bedfordshire. Pippa, what I really loved about the way you played Ulric's wife was actually how feisty she was, how strong, you know, not a shrinking violet in any way. What did you think of the whole process? Were you aware of Ulric or George Padmore or anything like that?
Again, I feel like before I sort of share my sort of experience of it, I just want to say thank you so much to Francis Anne for that amazing movie that, you know, as an actor, you literally, you know, you work hard and you do your sort of pathway through the film, but it's not until these moments you actually watch it and you go, oh, that brain, that's what you were holding all together while, you know, we were sort of talking through and planning Anne and Ulric's story. But I was so moved. I feel so, everything in me is sort of vibrating with so many different emotions of watching that film. And thank you so much. And I just turned to someone next to me and I was like, I've done a number of flipping films, but this one was like, is really extraordinary, and I can't wait for it to have more and more life. I really hope it does. So it feels like an absolute privilege to be part of that story. And watching back the scenes that Nikolai and I did, you know, were really great to watch, and interspersed with the real Anne Cross, who, you know, that's my inspiration, because she has, I mean, like, so much life to her.
Yeah, she's amazing.
She's amazing. Like, she just, and when I met with Francis the first day, you know, to actually just see whether I was going to get the job, she sent me all this footage of Anne Cross, and I just was like, I just love this woman.
Yeah.
I absolutely love her. And normally as an actor, you watch back at your stuff and you go, I hate what I've done. But I was, again, I just was like, I love this character. I think she's amazing. And the process that Francis Anne provides on set is really one that is very improvisational. So there is a skeleton of a scene. I mean, obviously, this woman has got the whole story really, like, there and contained in her head, but she gives you so much freedom, like, so much freedom, but at the same time is like, that's shit. Come on. I know you've got better in you. So, like, I don't know about, you know, Rudolph and Fraser, but I feel like, you know, each scene we did was... you know, you could have, like, I don't know, it was like an open-ended sort of scene. It was fantastic. And then you've spliced it together so beautifully. Yeah.
Yep. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
I can't even tell you what it means to me to get that kind of feedback from these partners, you know, because through when I was putting the film together over the years since I've seen them, I wanted to do justice to the energy and the commitment and the passion and the intelligence that they brought to those roles. And there was so much material to choose from. And we cut it every which way. You know, there were about 50 different films that were cut. And at the end of the day, you know, when I was finished the film, the actors were the first people I called. I called to say, I've done it, I've finished it, I want you to see it, because I'm proud of it, and I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of them. They're such brilliant, brilliant, brilliant actors, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Have you seen so much talent? No, seriously. When do actors get used? I'm boasting now, but when do you see actors acting their hearts out like that? It's wonderful.
And a lot of it is down to you, my dear.
Yes.
You also have the talent and the quality to bring the best out of us. And my only regret is that that I didn't work with you prior to this.
We'll now.
And I hope I will now. But no, the film itself was, there's so many messages that ran through the film that, number one, greed. Greed. And it's eating the souls of us. It's eating our innards anywhere you turn, whether it be the Caribbean, whether it be in Africa, whether it be over here. The bottom line is greed seems to fuel us, and we don't seem to get anywhere above a certain level. We need to change that. We need to leave legacies for our children. We can't follow and just take. We have to give. We have to create a society where we, as people, can exist. And I think those were lines that were used at some stage by Nkrumah. Greed. And that was, to me, that came through so powerful through the film. Togetherness, supporting and helping each other. So.
Absolutely right. One thing coming out of that, one thing I wanted to ask for, because we all agree this is an absolutely phenomenal film. Where does it go from here? You mentioned a short run, but it's the distribution, isn't it? We need somehow. Yeah. I was saying to the chef, we had a little a green room. Most of you didn't, but we did. It was lovely. Very tasty, superb chef. And I was saying to him that we've got a big event coming up, and we have to use the hotel's caterers, which are nowhere near as fabulous as him. He's absolutely a brilliant chef. And I was saying, what a shame we don't own it. We don't own the sort of hotel where we have decent chefs that we can just go to and have our functions. And it's kind of the same thing here. Spike Lee said the same when he was doing Malcolm X. He said, the distribution is the important thing. So what now happens to a film which should be seen by everyone? What happens?
Well, we've got a limited theatrical release in London, going up into the regions. And then we're going to go to, it's my commitment to take it back to all the audiences that I call it the Hero World Tour, to take it back to all the audiences that fed its creation. So we're going to Ghana and across Africa, South Africa. We're opening in the States at the end of the month. At the end of this month, we'll be, on May the 30th, we'll be screening it at the Lincoln Center. And I'll build a release around that. There's no question that it's hard. It's very, very difficult. What can we do? We just have to push and get our work seen and do what we have to do to get it out. It's not that I was just doing this for 9 years, okay? I don't want you to think I'm thick or something. I have another company called Caribbean Tales, and I run a festival and incubator program. I have about 4 or 5 different companies that keep me very busy. But I started I started this film. I jumped on board, as I told you, when Desmond died. And the first thing I did was interview Ulric. So all those pieces in there of Ulric talking to camera were interviews that I did with Ulric at the time. And I thought that it would be a documentary at the time. And then I began, and so based on the interview, I laid the interview out on a timeline and looked at his life. Then I began to research what was happening in those places that he was talking about going to, in order to put flesh on it, because at that point he was very literal in the way that he described it. And he would say, I did this and I went to that and such happened, but he wouldn't say, I felt this. And he had sort of potted anecdotes. I'm sure you remember that, Abigail. He had anecdotes that he would tell, and Richard, over and over and over and over again. But it was difficult to get under them and behind them and into the man. Actually, he was quite guarded. He was, emotionally, and in terms of, his feelings and stuff. So as a filmmaker, you want to move people, and you want to get into the blood and guts of a character. And that was really the biggest challenge I had. And so I did tons of research. Must have spent a year, and I learned so much. And then I began to narrow down what interested me, what grabbed me, the piece that grabbed me, that I felt was the untold story of the role that Caribbean professionals played in the African liberation movements, and how that was planned and concerted, and how it was undermined. That was why we don't know about it. Because I kept, anyway, I mean, it's very complicated. And then the issue came, okay, what is this going to be like? How are you going to tell the story of a man, which is also the story of his times, which is, how do you tell a story about a life that is also the story of the movement of history and the fall of empire, which is what it was, that crux period. And then I think I gradually found the voice of Ulric through the character of Nikolai. And he was good, huh?
Oh,
Wasn't he
yes.
fabulous?
Wow.
Yeah, he was amazing. And he also lived the film for, 5 years, yeah. Through the voice of Nikolai, and he worked really, really closely with me. And I began to use this technique that I also used in Reunion, which was to take archive, doesn't have black people in it, and cut us into it. I did that with Reunion. Adjoa, are you still here? There's Adjoa. So Adjoa Ando was in Reunion, my film, and we had so much fun. She played one of the women, Caribbean women, and herself and Martina Laird dressed up in uniforms, and we shot drama pieces, and then we cut out the white people, and we cut in the black people. So we put black women into history. Yay. It's like film terrorism, right? It's like Banksy, but film Banksy, right? And I love doing it. I can't even tell you how much I love doing it. I love taking, wars, any kind of scene that you see that doesn't have us in it, and then just shooting it and cutting it in, and it looks completely believable. Nobody would think you made it up, right? Because we didn't make it up. We were there. So that was when I discovered that, and I think the moment I discovered that was in the independence scene, when we shot that scene with about 8 people, the Ghana independence scene. You were there. And the actors were telling me, you don't want to do this. Don't you know that there were 1 million people there? And I was like, yeah, I want to do it. And so we shot it. There were 8 people there, 8 people and the actors. And then I got the footage and I intercut it. I told the editor to intercut it with my 8 people and put a football stadium track onto it. and to amplify the voice so that it sounds like he's on a microphone. And it's so moving and real. I thought I found it. I found the voice of the film. So that's what, those are the kind, and then the, okay. And then the other breakthrough I had was I always wanted it to be from my point of view. And so right from the beginning, I worked very closely with Nicola, his daughter. I wanted her to be me in the film. I wanted it to be the point of view of a mixed-race woman of another generation, a younger mixed-race woman. And the moment when I discovered that I could actually cast an actor to play that me, Nicola role, that younger mixed-race woman, the voice of another generation, another gender, the future, that was a big breakthrough, that she would be our perspective into the film. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's as I say, really, it's a reminder that, you know, there were heroes before us, but we can be heroes as well, you know. I mean, I think that I'm going back to this project that I'm doing with Frank, Underexposed, and one of the things that we're doing is we're photographing black British actors. I don't know if any of you guys are from Peckham, and you would have seen the underexposed portraits that Adjoa was a part of, and also Rudolph was a part of. And with every actor that was a part of that exhibition, we asked them to give us a gem of knowledge, that's something that they live by or something that feeds their daily life. And at the time, my gem of knowledge, this was 10 years ago when we launched it, was there is no deodorant for desperation. And I used to say that before I went into an audition, because I thought, well, you know, you don't want to be desperate walking into auditions. You need to be calm and relaxed and breathing, so that if they smell any element of desperation, you have no chance of getting that job. And coming back to the project now, over 10 years later, I realized that my gem of knowledge has shifted. And actually now my gem of knowledge is don't be afraid to be great. You know, and I think that it's shifted because I understand now what I can deliver as an actor. I understand what my experience gives me, and I understand that that's important to understand, to have that understanding myself, so that I can deliver that and that I can assist other young actors who are seeking guidance to deliver that as well, you know. So it's absolutely many heroes in this movie, but there are also many heroes now, and we have to kind of understand that and do something about it.
Well, I had to use Ulric's story as a backbone, you know, as really the hanger on which to hang the other stories, his life, his times. The times were hung on his life, and so I really had to use that as a kind of hanger. So a lot of things were dropped out of the wider context, in order to make it a coherent narrative, if you like.
So maybe there is a film to be made on NKRUMAH.
There's so many films. Actually, the actors who are from Ghana, who are amazing, big stars. One of them, John Dumelo, he came to Trinidad as well, and he said, you know, Francis Ann, this is great. We haven't even made our NKRUMAH film yet. There's so many stories to be told. So I think if there's one lesson I think that comes out of this experience is go tell your stories. Because so many people along this way told me, this is not a story. Go. You know, I asked so many people. I went and took advice from various white people, and they would inevitably tell me, you know, okay, my advice to you is don't make this film. It's not a good story.
Did they say why?
No.
Well, actually, we don't really care why.
Who cares? They were wrong.
You're absolutely right. Yeah.
I really appreciate your comments, because those, I agree. When I was making the film, I was very aware that Padmore died at 58, and NKRUMAH died at 63. These men died young, of course. They poisoned him, yeah. Lumumba died in his 20s, you know. So these were people who gave their lives for freedom and who were killed very deliberately. that was very much part, and it was heartbreaking making the film, particularly when we got to the part about Lumumba. You know, I remember like having nightmares and feeling so hopeless about that particular incident, and really wanting to put across the tragedy and the grief of the loss of that beautiful, beautiful spirit, and the way that democracy was completely undermined and cut short by the imperial powers. So absolutely, I mean, I think we see now, obviously, parallels in, you know, it's a terrifying time, and a lot of it's a time where we need to stand up and speak very loudly about what is right and for people. Because the forces of empire and capitalism are, you know, ruthlessly on the march all over the world. So yeah, and it's a good lesson about what happens when you stand up against them. So absolutely, thank you very much. I appreciate that comment. Racism, imperialism, colonialism, capitalism, greed. It's called colonialism. Because it's a very deliberate thing. They took us 400 years ago, enslaved, you know, told us we were inferior, blah, 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 blah. It's in the books. There's books about it. Yeah, absolutely. We plan to take it into schools. Yeah. Can I say something about one of the difficulties of telling the story was precisely that Ulric himself, like the dissonance between that story that you see and the man that we knew, because Ulric was very British. He was very, you wouldn't have known that story. And it raised a whole kind of exploration in my mind, because he lived until he was 96. And a whole kind of exploration in my mind of what you have to do to survive, like how you have to hide who you are in order to actually just physically live a long life, which he did. And so I think that's interesting, you know, when we think back on that generation and the generations before of black people who they had to hide who they were and what they were doing. I mean, it's kind of a cliche of slavery as well, that, you know, not every skin teeth is a smile, that they had to, you know, hide to develop rebellious things. They had to develop calypso in order to hide. But in our men particularly, you had to, you know, look white. You had to pass, even if you were black, in order to just survive. So it was a long process of actually that, to this day, an ongoing conversation of Ulric didn't do those things. Yes, he did. No, that wasn't the person I knew. Yes, well, he did do it. I assure you, he was there. He got those awards. He played those roles. He was doing those things. It's true. You know, so it's an interesting. It's in plain sight. Her name is Daphne Park. She was highly decorated person. You look her up, Google her. She was the head of MI6 in the Congo, and on her deathbed, she admitted to having ordered the assassination of Patrice Lumumba.
Wow.
It's documented. The thing that interested me when you say, like, why did I make the film? The thing that interested me, and I think it's relevant to the whole issue of what's going on now around the Windrush tragedy and scandal, is that he was that of that generation. A lot of them were, but instead of staying in England and accepting the limitations on his life, he took Padmore, offered him an opportunity, and he took it and he went. And a lot of them did. And it took him on a journey to another world, a world where we were actively building an alternative to those limitations. So he left Europe and he went to a world where all across Africa there was the vision of a united state, a peaceful, prosperous United States of Africa. I found that riveting. I found that very compelling and beautiful, that we could all stop worrying about what Britain is doing to us and focus on building our own realities.
Resilience, fortitude, the long game, and the ability that Francis Anne has to, in moments of, believe me, crisis, when you're looking around and you just think, how are you able to focus and concentrate and put the team together to deliver really what are just really gems of beautiful moments of genius, really. It's just extraordinary. Looking back on it now, I can't say enough that, you know, the resilience and the fortitude that you had over the period we're doing it is just not to be underestimated. To be in this business as an artist, you know, you're riding like this constantly. Some years you're like soaring, other years you're like down, other years you're on, you know, you're just sailing on the level, you know. And Francis Anne was able to kind of bring us together in a way that, looking back on it now, I just find it amazing what you did. And the way you just pieced it all together.
I dreamt of those days. I dreamt of this day. I never thought it would come.
Can I pose the same question to you, Pippa?
I feel like I've been sort of invited into this story. That Anne has been a major part of this story, and lessons that I've learned is it has opened my eyes up to worlds I would never have been exposed to before, and stories that I would never have been a part of the tapestry of. So it's a huge privilege for me to have a place in that story, and also just, you know, to work with great friends. Like, a lot of my friends were in this film. Friends of mine passed me on to Francis Anne to be in this film, and it feels like a community that I am part of as well, and there feels something very, I don't know, just really fucking good. as you know, a white woman, to be part of that, you know. So I feel very privileged to be Anne Cross in this movie.
Can I just? I wanted to say something about Anne, actually, because it was obviously something I thought about. You know, Ulric had a thing for white women. He really, you know, like a lot of that generation, they had relationships with white women mostly, so I did a lot of thinking about it, and I'm glad that I think it worked out. I'm glad that. I feel like the love story between Anne and Ulric comes through, that they loved and respected each other and grew together. And I particularly, you know, I started off the film saying that I didn't want white people in the movie. It was irrelevant to them. I just didn't need them. I wanted to tell a story about us, but she was in the film. You know, she was in it, and she was an amazing character. And as Jack Beulah said a couple days ago, he said, I came to realize that she's an African sister. She threw herself into that life and became that life. And I think it speaks to the fact that it's not about race, actually. It's about us as human beings embracing our humanity, all of us, you know. And so I want to thank Pippa, because that's what she did, working with us on this film. So thank you. And the next step, okay, I'm doing two things. I'm taking Hero on a world tour, and then at the same, and I'm also making a new film. I have to. I love making movies. I love telling these stories. It's a film about a Canadian. I live in Canada, so it's a film about a Canadian guy called Denham Jolly, who's a millionaire and activist. And he wrote a book about his life. He's a friend of mine, and I've just started working on it. He began his life when he arrived in Canada. He joined a community of the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association in Canada. I could go on, but it was Marcus Garvey's movement. So it's an opportunity to carry on this journey of telling people's stories and telling stories of people and putting us into history. putting us back into history,
where we should be.
where we should be, where we are.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think what we've all heard today is we've all got our stories, and it's up to us to make sure that we tell them. Yes.
Yeah.
In a true way.
That is really, you know, because in terms of resilience, I'll just say that that's not, you know, it was hard holding on. Holding on and believing that the only thing that kept me going really was the fact that it was a deathbed promise that my mother made to one of her best friends. That was the only, I had to fulfill it, and I had to do it before my mother died so that she could know that I did that. And that's what kept me going, to tell what I believe has turned into a unique story, which can be a template for all kinds of other stories. So thank you very much, everybody.
Sorry, can I just say, just before it looks like we're wrapping up,
Hold on, yes, Fraser.
just to quickly say what an absolute pleasure it is to see Rudolph Walker alongside us, looking so damn fine. And you know, I just want to thank him for his service, you know, and for allowing us younger actors, you know, getting on a bit now, to stand on his shoulders. And, you know, thank him for all that he does, because Rudolph, you know, been watching you for years and years and years. And to see you here looking so good, looking so damn fine, you know, it's just a real pleasure. So thank you very much, Rudolph.
Okay.
Thank you.
Right. So we've come to the end, and I just want to say, as Fraser said, our thanks to Rudolph Walker, our thanks to Fraser James, our great thanks to Pippa Dixon as well. Nixon. Yeah. Pippa Nixon, and last but certainly not least, to the absolutely amazing filmmaker that she is, Frances Ann Sumner.